The neutral zone existed in that strange liminal space where neither species felt comfortable, but both had agreed to meet anyway. A stretch of barren land beneath a sky that couldn't decide if it was dawn or still night. Lieutenant Marcus Webb adjusted his helmet's atmospheric filter and tried not to think about how many ways this could go catastrophically wrong. His platoon, 20 soldiers arranged in a defensive semicircle, waited with the kind of rigid stillness that came from extensive training and moderate terror. "Stay sharp," Colonel Santos's voice crackled through the calm. "They'll be here in 5 minutes. Remember, weapons down unless I give the direct order. We're here to facilitate peace talks, not start the war everyone's been itching for." Marcus checked his rifle for the 17th time, noting that the safety was on, knowing that meant exactly nothing if someone got jumpy. 30 years of Cold War, 30 years of two species circling each other like wary predators, and it all came down to this. A meeting on neutral ground to discuss maybe, possibly, not destroying each other. The optimism was overwhelming. "You think they'll actually show?" Private Chen asked from his left, her voice tight with nerves. They confirmed 3 times. "They'll show." Marcus scanned the horizon where the Seraphim delegation was supposed to appear. "Question is whether anyone on either side actually wants this to work." "Pessimistic this morning, Lieutenant." "Realistic. There's a lot of people making money off this Cold War. Arms manufacturers, military contractors, politicians who built careers on fear." He adjusted his stance, his boots crunching on the frost-covered ground. "Peace is bad for business." The Seraphim appeared exactly on schedule, emerging from the morning mist like they'd been crafted from it. Marcus had seen them before: surveillance footage, training vids, the occasional long-range visual during border patrols, but never this close. They were tall, averaging around 6.5 feet, with opalescent skin that seemed to shift colors in the uncertain light. Their ears swept upward and back in elegant curves that gave them an almost ethereal appearance, and they moved with a grace that made human movement look clumsy by comparison. There were 12 of them, including warriors in adaptive armor that probably cost more than Marcus's entire year's salary, diplomats in formal robes that dragged slightly on the ground, and unexpectedly, what looked like civilians. Marcus's breath caught when he noticed the young woman near the center of the group, carrying a bundle wrapped in silvery cloth that moved with the unmistakable squirming of an infant. "They brought a baby to peace negotiations." Chen whispered, incredulous. "Maybe it's a cultural thing, symbol of trust, showing they're invested in the future." But Marcus felt uneasy anyway, his instincts, honed by 7 years of military service, screaming that bringing a child to a potential conflict zone was either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. The two groups faced each other across 50 meters of frozen ground, and the tension was thick enough that Marcus could taste it through his filter. Colonel Santos stepped forward, her weathered face set in the diplomatic expression she used when she wanted to shoot something but couldn't. The lead Seraphim diplomat, distinguished by additional markings on his armor, moved to meet her. "We acknowledge your presence," the Seraphim said, his voice rendered through the translator devices as melodic but formal. "We come in pursuit of mutual understanding and cessation of hostilities." "Yeah, same," Santos replied, her own translator no doubt mangling the nuance into something appropriately blunt. "We've prepared a structure for preliminary discussions, if you'll follow." The shot came from nowhere and everywhere, a crack that split the morning air like breaking glass. Later, the investigation would determine it was from a human extremist group hidden in the rocks, firing on their own people to sabotage the peace. But in that moment, all anyone knew was that someone had fired and 30 years of conditioning took over. Both sides reached for weapons. Safeties clicked off. Targeting systems engaged. In the space of 3 seconds, they went from tentative peace to the edge of massacre, and Marcus felt his finger hovering over his trigger while his brain screamed at him to not fire, don't fire. This is what they want. The baby started crying. Not a gentle fussing, but the full-throated wail of an infant terrified by loud noises and the sudden tension of the adult holding them. The sound cut through everything: the adrenaline, the fear, the decades of propaganda about dangerous aliens who couldn't be trusted. It was just a baby crying, scared and confused, and every single person with a weapon drawn suddenly looked deeply uncomfortable. The young seraphim woman, the mother, Marcus realized, clutched her child tighter, her violet eyes wide with terror. She backed up a step, then another, looking around at the circle of armed soldiers like she was trapped in a nightmare. The baby wailed louder, and Marcus saw her whispering something in her own language, probably reassurances that everything was okay even though it clearly wasn't. Nobody moved. Humans and seraphim alike frozen in that horrible tableau, weapons ready, a crying baby in the middle, and absolutely no protocol for this situation. Marcus could feel his heart slamming against his ribs, his finger still on the trigger, his entire being screaming that this was wrong. All of it was wrong. The mother's eyes met his across the distance, and he saw in them the same fear he'd seen in human civilians during evacuations, during disasters, during any moment when someone's primary concern was protecting their child. Not political fear, not military calculation, just the primal terror of a parent who doesn't know how to keep their baby safe. Marcus made his decision before his brain could overthink it. He clicked his safety back on, slung his rifle over his shoulder with deliberate slowness, and raised his hands in clear view. Then he stepped forward. "Webb, stand down." Colonel Santos hissed through the comm. He ignored her. 3 steps forward, out of the human line, into the neutral space where any seraphim with an itchy trigger finger could drop him. 4 steps. 5. The baby kept crying, and the mother watched him approach with an expression that cycled between hope and terror. "Lieutenant, that's an order." 6 steps. 7. He was halfway across the space now, completely exposed, relying entirely on the hope that nobody wanted to be the person who shot the idiot trying to help a crying baby. He kept his movements slow, unthreatening, his hands visible and empty. 8 steps. 9. The Seraphim warriors had their weapons trained on him now, but they weren't firing. The mother was watching him intently, her child still wailing against her shoulder. 10 steps, and he was close enough to see the tears running down her face, the way her hands trembled as she held her baby. "Hey," Marcus said softly, knowing his translator would render it into something approximating Seraphim. "It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you, either of you." She stared at him, breathing hard, and the baby's cries had taken on a desperate edge that made Marcus's chest ache. He'd grown up with younger siblings, had helped his mother with his baby sister when he was barely a teenager himself. He knew that sound, the sound of a child too scared to be comforted easily. He made a gentle rocking motion with his arms, the universal gesture of soothing an infant, and then gestured toward the baby, asking permission, showing he understood this was her choice. The mother looked at him for a long moment, her violet eyes searching his face for something he hoped was there. Then slowly, she shifted the baby toward him, unwrapping enough of the silvery cloth that Marcus could see a tiny face, opalescent skin, and little hands waving frantically in distress. Marcus reached out carefully, supporting the baby's head the way he'd been taught years ago, and lifted the infant into his arms. The child was lighter than human babies, warm and solid and real, with wide eyes that were starting to focus on his face. The crying didn't stop immediately, but Marcus started rocking gently, humming under his breath. An old lullaby his mother used to sing, something about stars and sailing ships. Around them, 50-some soldiers from 2 species watched in absolute silence as a human lieutenant comforted an alien infant in the middle of a potential war zone. Marcus ignored all of them, focused entirely on the baby whose cries were starting to subside into hiccups and sniffles. He kept humming, kept rocking, and slowly, impossibly, the baby calmed. Tiny hands grabbed at his uniform, and the infant made a sound that wasn't quite crying anymore, more like a questioning whimper. Marcus smiled despite everything, despite the weapons still aimed at his back, despite knowing he'd probably be court-martialed for this. "There you go," he murmured. "See, not so scary, just loud and stupid like most humans." The mother laughed, choked and watery but genuine. She reached out, her hand hovering near his arm, and spoke in her own language. The translator rendered it clearly. "Thank you, he was frightened. We all were." Marcus looked at her properly for the first time, seeing past the alien features to the exhaustion in her eyes, the tension in her shoulders, the way she'd positioned herself to shield her child even when it meant putting herself in danger. "What's his name?" "Kyron." She touched the baby's head gently, her fingers brushing against Marcus's hand. "He is 4 months by your calendar, too young for this. But I could not leave him, could not trust others with him during such an important time." "I get it. If I had a kid, I'd want them where I could see them too." Marcus carefully handed Kyron back, watching as the mother cradled her son with visible relief. "I'm Marcus. Lieutenant Marcus Webb, but just Marcus works fine." "Lyra." She held her son close and Kyron grabbed her finger, apparently decided the crisis was over. "Lyra Shinvara, and I am grateful for your kindness. It is not what I expected." "Yeah, well, I'm full of surprises. Usually terrible ones." He glanced back at his platoon, saw Colonel Santos watching with an expression that promised a very interesting debriefing. "Guess I should get back before my commanding officer has an aneurysm." "Lieutenant Webb." Lyra's voice stopped him. "What you did, stepping forward when everyone else remained frozen, that took courage. Perhaps there is hope for this peace after all." Marcus met her violet eyes and felt something shift in his understanding of the universe. "Yeah, maybe there is." He walked back to his line, feeling every weapon tracking his movement, and took his position beside Chen, who was staring at him like he'd grown a second head. "You're absolutely insane," she whispered. "Probably. But that baby stopped crying, didn't it?" Colonel Santos's voice crackled through the calm, dry as desert sand. "Webb, you and I are going to have a very long conversation about following orders. But first," she addressed the Seraphim delegation, "let's get these negotiations started. I think we've had enough excitement for one morning." As both groups began moving toward the prepared negotiation structure, Marcus caught Lyra watching him over her shoulder, Kyron peaceful in her arms. She nodded once, a gesture of acknowledgement that needed no translation. And Lieutenant Marcus Webb realized that sometimes the most important battles weren't won with weapons at all. The negotiation structure was a prefabricated diplomatic module that looked like someone had mashed together human and seraphim design aesthetics and hoped for the best. The result was functional but aesthetically confused, with angular human engineering supporting the flowing curved seraphim architecture preferred. Marcus stood at attention outside while the senior diplomats filed in, watching as Lyra entered last, Kyron now sleeping peacefully against her shoulder. Colonel Santos appeared at his elbow, her weathered face unreadable. "Walk with me, Lieutenant." They moved away from the structure, far enough that the other soldiers couldn't easily overhear. Marcus braced himself for the reprimand, the lecture about chain of command and following orders, and how his actions could have gotten everyone killed. "That was either the bravest or stupidest thing I've seen in 30 years of service," Santos said finally. "Possibly both." "Ma'am, I'm not finished." She stopped, turning to face him. It was also exactly the right thing to do. That baby crying broke something in everyone out there, reminded us what we're supposedly fighting for. But we were all frozen, locked into our training and protocols. You weren't. Marcus blinked. "I'm not being court-martialed." "Oh, there'll be paperwork, lots of it, and you violated about 6 different regulations." Santos's expression softened slightly. "But you also did more for peace in 5 minutes than decades of failed negotiations. The Seraphim delegation specifically requested you as a liaison. Something about demonstrating genuine compassion and breaking through conditioned hostility. They want me as a liaison. Ma'am, I'm a soldier, not a diplomat." Congratulations, Webb, now you're both. She clapped him on the shoulder. Report to the diplomatic module after lunch. Try not to start any wars before then. The assignment turned out to be less formal than Marcus expected. Instead of sitting in on high-level negotiations, he spent his time helping facilitate practical communication, making sure translation devices were working, explaining human customs that confused the Seraphim, answering questions about everything from military structure to why humans insisted on drinking beverages hot enough to cause tissue damage. Lyra was there often, sometimes with Chiron, sometimes without. She served as a cultural advisor for her own delegation, explaining Seraphim perspectives to diplomats who'd spent decades viewing her people as threats. Their paths crossed multiple times daily, and Marcus found himself looking forward to those encounters more than he probably should. Your people shake hands, Lyra observed one afternoon, watching human delegates greeting each other. Chiron was awake in her arms, his violet eyes tracking the movement around them with infant curiosity. This is a trust gesture, yes, showing empty hands, no weapons. Something like that. Though honestly, most of us just do it because it's polite. Marcus moved closer, unable to resist making faces at Chiron, who rewarded him with what might have been a smile. How's he doing? No lasting trauma from this morning's excitement. Babies are resilient, more so than adults, I think. Lyra shifted Chiron to her other arm, and Marcus noticed the exhaustion in her posture. Though I will admit I have slept very little since we arrived. Every sound makes me worry. Yeah, I get that. This whole thing has everyone on edge. He hesitated, then added, there's a break room in the human section. Quiet, private, and the coffee's only moderately terrible. If you wanted somewhere to rest while the diplomats argue about trade agreements. Lyra studied him with those unsettling violet eyes, and Marcus wondered if he just committed some horrible cultural faux pas. Then she smiled, and the expression transformed her face from merely beautiful to something that made his breath catch. I would appreciate that. Thank you, Marcus. The break room was empty. A small mercy since Marcus wasn't sure how he'd explain bringing an alien mother and child into a supposedly secure area. Lyra settled into one of the chairs with visible relief, adjusting Chiron so he could look around at the new environment. You are kind to us, she said after a moment. To me and Chiron. This is not what I was taught to expect from humans. Marcus poured 2 cups of coffee, one for himself, one for Lyra if she wanted to try it, and sat across from her. What were you taught to expect? That humans are aggressive, territorial, unable to understand perspectives beyond their own immediate needs. She accepted the coffee cup, sniffing it cautiously. That you see other species as threats or resources, never as equals. Yeah, we get taught similar things about Seraphim. That you're cold, logical to the point of cruelty, that you view emotions as weakness. He sipped his own coffee, grimacing at the burnt taste. Guess propaganda works the same regardless of species. Propaganda. Lyra tested the word, rolling it around like she was examining a strange artifact. Yes, that is accurate. She took a small sip of coffee, and her face did something complicated that made Marcus laugh. Not a fan. It is aggressive, like drinking liquid heat and bitterness. But she took another sip anyway. Why do humans consume this? Mostly because we're tired and it's socially acceptable. Unlike the other solutions to being tired, like sleeping at work or screaming into the void. He watched Chiron grab at his mother's hair, tiny fingers tangling in the silvery strands. Can I ask you something? Why'd you bring him? To the negotiations, I mean. That had to be risky. Lyra's expression clouded. I am alone here, Chiron's father. He did not. I'm optimistic. There's a difference. He set down his coffee, leaning forward. Look, I'm not going to pretend this is easy. Both sides have people who profit from conflict, who have built careers on fear. But we also have people like you and me who are tired of it, who want something better. And you believe we are enough, 2 people who want peace. I believe 2 people who want peace is 2 more than we had yesterday. He smiled at her startled expression. Besides, you've got an advantage I don't. You brought the ultimate diplomatic weapon, an adorable baby that makes even hardened soldiers question their life choices. Lyra laughed, genuine and surprised. You are strange, Marcus Webb. I do not understand half of what you say, but it makes me feel lighter, like perhaps the universe is not entirely cruel. The universe is definitely cruel, but sometimes it surprises you, like putting a human soldier who can't follow orders in the same place as a seraphim mother with a crying baby. He stood, moving to the window where he could see both delegations mingling awkwardly in the courtyard. We're all just figuring this out as we go. Might as well figure it out together. The days blurred into weeks, and Marcus found himself spending more time with Lyra than anyone else. They fell into an easy rhythm. She'd find him during breaks, they'd talk about everything and nothing, and Chiron would tolerate Marcus's presence with increasingly obvious delight. The baby was starting to recognize him, reaching out with tiny hands whenever Marcus appeared, making sounds that his mother assured him were positive. He likes you, Lyra said one evening, watching Chiron grab Marcus's finger and refuse to let go. Seraphim infants are typically wary of strangers, but you he trusts. Smart kid, knows quality when he sees it. Marcus gently extracted his finger, only for Chiron to immediately grab another one. Or he just likes the texture of human skin, probably the second thing. You make jokes when you are uncomfortable. I have noticed this. Lyra tilted her head, studying him. Why does Chiron's affection make you uncomfortable? Marcus considered dodging the question, then decided honesty was probably the better approach. Because I'm starting to care about both of you, and that's complicated. You're not supposed to get attached to people on the other side of a Cold War. It violates about a dozen unspoken rules. And you care about rules. Not really, but I care about not screwing up something important. He met her eyes, saw understanding there. This peace process, it matters. Getting emotionally involved with someone from the Seraphim delegation probably isn't the smartest move. No, Lyra agreed softly. It is not smart. It is also too late. For me, at least. The admission hung in the air between them, heavy with implications neither was quite ready to address. Marcus felt his heart rate spike, felt the weight of her words settling somewhere in his chest. Lyra, you do not have to respond. I simply wanted you to know. She stood, gathering Chiron and his various supplies with practiced efficiency. I should return. The evening session will begin soon, and they will need cultural clarification on approximately 12 things. Wait, Marcus stood too, moving without conscious thought to block her path gently. I'm not good at this, at feelings or relationships or any of the normal human stuff. But I need you to know that when I stepped forward that first day, when I heard Chiron crying, I didn't do it because of protocol or strategy. I did it because seeing you scared made something in me break. Lyra's breath caught. Marcus, I'm not saying I have this figured out. I'm not even saying I know what this is. But whatever it is, I don't think I can stop it. And honestly, I don't want to. She reached up with her free hand, her cool fingers touching his face with a gentleness that made his chest ache. Then perhaps we are both fools, but I find I do not mind if it means being foolish with you. Chiron chose that moment to make a sound of protest, apparently tired of being ignored, and they both laughed. The tension broke, reformed into something softer and more hopeful. He's right, Marcus said. This is getting too serious. Want to come see the human rec room? I can introduce you to the horror that is military television programming. That sounds terrible. It absolutely is, but the company's good. They left together, a human soldier and a seraphim mother with her infant son, and if anyone noticed the way their hands almost touched as they walked, nobody said anything. Some things, it seemed, transcended protocol. At least for now. The peace talks were progressing with the kind of glacial slowness that made Marcus want to bang his head against diplomatic modules, but they were progressing. Small victories, agreements on communication protocols, demilitarized zones, trade goods that wouldn't cause either species cultural offense. It wasn't the sweeping peace treaty everyone hoped for, but it was something. It was a start. Marcus had been officially reassigned as permanent liaison, which meant his days consisted of translation assistance, cultural clarification, and what Colonel Santos cheerfully called making sure nobody accidentally starts a war through misunderstanding dinner customs. He'd also become the unofficial babysitter for Kyron whenever Lyra needed both hands free, a role he'd stumbled into and discovered he actually enjoyed. "You are better with him than I expected," Lyra observed one afternoon, watching Marcus successfully convince Kyron that eating his lunch was more interesting than throwing it. Most warriors of either species view childcare as beneath them. Most warriors are idiots. Marcus wiped pureed something or other off Kyron's face, earning a delighted gurgle. Besides, he's good company. Doesn't judge my terrible jokes, doesn't care about interspecies politics, just wants food and attention. It's refreshing. He loves you. Lyra's voice was soft, carrying layers of meaning Marcus wasn't sure he was ready to unpack. I see it in how he reaches for you, how he calms when you speak. You have become important to him. Feelings mutual, little guy. Marcus booped Kyron's nose gently, earning another gurgle. Though I'm probably teaching him terrible habits, your people are going to wonder why he keeps making human facial expressions. Let them wonder. Lyra moved closer, her hand settling on Marcus's shoulder in a gesture that was becoming familiar. I find I care less about what my people think than I once did. They'd been dancing around the growing connection between them for weeks now, acknowledging it in small ways but never quite addressing what it meant. Marcus knew the other humans had noticed. Chen made pointed comments about cross-species rapport, and even Colonel Santos had pulled him aside to ask if he understood the political implications of his relationship with the Seraphim delegation. He understood. He just didn't care as much as he probably should. "Lyra, we should probably talk about." The explosion cut him off, a deep concussive boom that shook the entire diplomatic module. Alarms shrieked, lights flashed red, and through the window Marcus saw smoke billowing from the eastern section. His training kicked in immediately. Grab Kyron, shield him, position himself between the baby and any potential threats. What happened? Lyra's voice was sharp with fear. Bomb. Probably extremists, either side could have planted it. Marcus was already moving. Kyron clutched against his chest while he pulled Lyra toward the emergency exit. "We need to get you both somewhere safe." The corridors were chaos, people running in multiple directions, more explosions sounding from different sections of the complex. Marcus's comm crackled to life with overlapping voices. Santos ordering defensive positions, someone screaming about casualties, another explosion registering on sensors. "This is coordinated," he muttered, his mind automatically assembling tactical data. Multiple entry points, simultaneous detonations. Someone planned this carefully. They reached an emergency shelter, and Marcus practically shoved Lyra and Kyron inside before sealing the door. Through his helmet display, he could see the situation deteriorating. Both human and Seraphim extremists were attacking, using the peace talks as an opportunity to maximize casualties on both sides. "I have to go," he said, hating the words even as he spoke them. "My platoon needs me. You'll be safe here. These shelters are designed to withstand direct assault." "No." Lyra grabbed his arm, her violet eyes fierce. "You cannot leave. You will be killed. It's my job. People are dying out there, Lyra. I can't just hide while..." "While what?" "While you play hero and leave Kyron without the person he loves." "Leave me," her voice cracked. "You said you cared, prove it." "Stay." Marcus felt something tear inside him, duty warring with the desperate need to keep them safe personally. But more explosions echoed through the complex, and he knew people were dying while he stood here. He gently extracted his arm from Lyra's grip. "I care about you both more than I know how to say. That's why I have to go." He pressed his access card into her hand. "This will let you open the shelter from inside if you need to evacuate. Wait for the all-clear signal. If you don't get it within an hour, run." He kissed her forehead, quick and desperate, then pressed his hand to Kyrn's head. The baby was crying, frightened by the noise and chaos, and Marcus felt his heart break a little. "I'll come back," he promised. "I swear I'll come back." He left before she could respond, sealing the shelter behind him and throwing himself into the chaos outside. The next 40 minutes were a blur of combat, identifying hostiles, coordinating with both human and seraphim forces who were suddenly fighting on the same side, clearing buildings and extracting wounded. The extremists had underestimated one thing: how quickly people who were tentatively trying to make peace would unite against a common threat. Marcus found himself fighting alongside seraphim warriors, their enhanced reflexes and his tactical training complementing each other naturally. They communicated through hand signals and shared urgency. Two species who'd been enemies yesterday working together, because the alternative was letting extremists win. He took a hit, plasma graze across his shoulder that his suit's medical systems immediately dosed with painkillers and clotting agents, but kept moving. Somewhere in this chaos, Lyra and Kyrn were waiting, and he'd promised to come back. The all-clear sounded 90 minutes after the first explosion. Casualties on both sides, but nowhere near what the extremists had hoped for. The coordinated defense had worked, and more importantly, both human and seraphim forces had chosen to protect the peace rather than descend into mutual destruction. Marcus limped back to the emergency shelter, his shoulder screaming despite the drugs. He opened it with his override code, and Lyra emerged like a storm, Kyrn clutched to her chest and tears streaming down her face. "You're alive." She touched his face, his chest, his injured shoulder, as if confirming he was real. "You're alive and you're hurt and you're an idiot." "Yeah, I get that a lot." He winced as her hand pressed on the injury. "Lyra, I'm sorry." She kissed him, fierce and desperate and tasting of salt tears. Kyrn, trapped between them, made a sound of protest and they broke apart, laughing through their tears. "Do not apologize for being who you are," Lyra said firmly. "I am angry and relieved and terrified, but I am not surprised. You step forward when others freeze. It is why Kyrn loves you, why I love you." Marcus felt the words hit him like a physical blow, knocking the air from his lungs. "Lyra, I know it is complicated. I know there will be opposition from both our peoples. I know we are in the middle of negotiations that could determine the future of two species." She shifted Kyrn to one arm, using her free hand to grip Marcus's uniform. "I do not care. I love you, Marcus Webb. Somehow between that first moment and now, you became the person I trust most in this universe. I love you too." The words came easily, naturally, like they'd been waiting for permission. "I don't know how we make this work, but I want to try. You and Kyrn, you've become my family." Kyrn chose that moment to reach for Marcus, making grabby hands and the specific sound he used when he wanted attention. Marcus took him carefully, mindful of his injury, and the baby immediately settled against his chest with a contented sigh. "See." Lyra laughed through her tears. "He knows. Children always know who loves them." Around them, the compound was a disaster: smoke damage, structural failures, and the aftermath of violence that had tried to tear apart fragile peace. But standing there with Lyra beside him and Kyrn in his arms, Marcus felt something he hadn't expected. "Hope, we should probably talk to Colonel Santos," he said eventually. "Figure out what happens next. Must we?" Lyra leaned against him, careful of his injury. "Can we not simply stay here and pretend the universe does not require decisions?" "That sounds amazing. Unfortunately, the universe has terrible timing." He shifted Kyrn to his uninjured side. "Come on. Let's go face the complicated political implications of a human soldier falling in love with a seraphim mother." "You make it sound dramatic." "Have you met politics? Everything's dramatic." They walked together through the damaged complex, and Marcus noticed the stares, both human and seraphim watching them with expressions ranging from surprise to disapproval to something that might have been hope. Colonel Santos met them in the command center, took one look at Marcus holding Chiron while Lyra stayed close to his side and sighed deeply. "Webb, you have a talent for making my job interesting." "Just doing my part, ma'am." "We need to talk, all three of you. Well, four if we're counting the baby." Santos gestured to her office. "This is going to get complicated, and I need you both to understand what you're walking into." As they followed her, Chiron grabbed Marcus's finger and refused to let go, and Marcus thought that maybe, just maybe, some things were worth any amount of complication. Colonel Santos's office had survived the attack largely intact, though the window had a spiderweb crack across one corner that would probably cost a fortune to replace. She waved Marcus and Lyra to chairs, eyeing Chiron with the expression of someone who'd never quite figured out how to interact with babies. "So," Santos said, leaning back in her chair with the air of someone about to deliver bad news. "I've been getting calls, a lot of calls, from both Human Command and Seraphim leadership. Everyone wants to know about the Human Lieutenant and the Seraphim Cultural Advisor who are apparently—" She gestured vaguely at them. "Whatever it is you're doing." "We're together," Marcus said simply. "That's what we're doing." "Yes, Webb, I gathered that from the way you ran into active combat, came back bleeding, and she immediately kissed you in front of approximately 40 witnesses." Santos pinched the bridge of her nose. "Do you understand what kind of political nightmare this creates?" "Probably a significant one," Lyra said, her voice calm despite the tension in her shoulders. "My people will view it as weakness. Emotional attachment to a former enemy, improper behavior from a widow who should be focused solely on her child. There will be calls for my removal from the delegation. And the humans will see it as potential security risk," Marcus added. "Questions about divided loyalties, concerns about information sharing, probably some ugly speculation about honey traps and espionage." Santos blinked. "You've both thought about this." "We're not idiots, ma'am, just stubborn." Marcus adjusted Chiron, who'd fallen asleep against his chest. "What are you going to do about it?" The colonel was quiet for a long moment, her weathered face thoughtful. Then she smiled, sharp and fierce. "I'm going to tell both command structures that they can file their complaints directly into the nearest waste disposal. You two want to know what I saw today? I saw human and seraphim forces fighting together for the first time in 30 years. I saw soldiers from both species dragging each other out of fire zones, sharing medical supplies, coordinating like they'd trained together for months. You know why that happened? The extremists gave us a common enemy," Marcus said. "No, well, yes, but that's not the main reason." Santos pointed at them. "It happened because everyone out there has been watching you two for weeks. Watching a human soldier care for a seraphim child. Watching a seraphim mother trust a human with her son. Watching you build something real in the middle of 3 decades of hate. You showed everyone that maybe the other side isn't so other after all." Lyra's hand found Marcus's, their fingers intertwining. "You are saying our relationship helps the peace process." "I'm saying your relationship is the peace process. All this diplomatic talk about trade routes and demilitarized zones, that's just paperwork. Real peace happens when people from both sides look at each other and see family instead of enemies." Santos stood, moving to the cracked window. "So here's what's going to happen. You're both going to officially request joint ambassador status. A human and seraphim partnership dedicated to building bridges between species. It'll be politically complicated, there will be opposition, and you'll probably spend the next decade dealing with bureaucratic nightmares. Questions?" Marcus and Lyra exchanged glances. "That's it?" Marcus asked. "You're just endorsing this?" "Webb, I've been in the military for 32 years. I've seen 3 failed peace attempts, lost friends to pointless skirmishes, and spent more time planning for war than I ever spent trying to prevent it." Santos turned back to face them, her expression softer than Marcus had ever seen it. "You're giving me hope that maybe my grandchildren won't have to fight the same stupid war I did. So yeah, I'm endorsing this." I'm also going to make sure you have institutional support, even if I have to threaten every politician between here and Earth to get it. The Seraphim Council will resist, Lyra said quietly. Especially when they learn about Chiron's attachment to Marcus. They will say I am allowing human influence to corrupt my son. Then we'll deal with it. Marcus looked down at the sleeping baby in his arms, at the tiny face that had somehow become the center of his universe. Whatever it takes. The formal proposal took 2 weeks to draft, navigate through both bureaucracies, and present to leadership on both sides. Marcus spent the time alternating between diplomatic meetings and helping Lyra care for Chiron, who was growing more active and opinionated by the day. The baby had developed a clear preference for Marcus's presence, crying when he left and settling immediately when he returned. "You have stolen my son's affections," Lyra teased one evening, watching Chiron refuse to sleep until Marcus picked him up. "Can't help being naturally charming, it's a gift." Marcus rocked Chiron gently, humming the lullaby that had become their routine. Besides, he knows quality when he sees it. Modest as always. One of my many virtues. The response from both governments came simultaneously. A reluctant approval hedged with so many conditions and requirements that the document was 40 pages long. But buried in the bureaucratic language was permission. They could serve as joint ambassadors, could continue their relationship, could build the future they'd started that first day when Marcus stepped forward to comfort a crying child. The formal signing ceremony was held in the rebuilt diplomatic center, witnessed by representatives from both species. Marcus wore his dress uniform, feeling uncomfortable in clothing designed for ceremony rather than combat. Lyra wore traditional Seraphim formal robes, silver and blue that made her look like she'd stepped out of a painting. Chiron, held by a Seraphim caretaker during the ceremony, made his opinions known with enthusiastic babbling that echoed through the chamber. Lieutenant Marcus Webb and cultural advisor Lyra Shenvara, the human ambassador, intoned, reading from prepared text that had been negotiated down to every syllable. "You are hereby recognized as the first joint ambassadorial partnership between the Human Federation and the Seraphim Sovereignty. Your mission is to facilitate understanding, build connections, and serve as living proof that our species can coexist peacefully. Do you accept this responsibility?" "We do," they said in unison. The Seraphim representative stepped forward, his expression still carrying disapproval but his words formal and binding. "May your partnership bring honor to both peoples and shame to those who profit from conflict. May your union demonstrate that the future need not repeat the past." As applause filled the chamber, some enthusiastic, some polite, all of it politically significant, Marcus felt Lyra's hand slip into his. He squeezed gently, feeling the coolness of her skin against his warmth, feeling the weight of what they were promising. The ceremony concluded, and Lyra immediately moved to retrieve Chiron, who launched himself at Marcus with the kind of enthusiasm that suggested he'd been personally offended by the separation. Marcus caught him, laughing as tiny hands grabbed his face. "Miss me, buddy?" "He always misses you," Lyra said, moving to stand beside them. "I think you have ruined him for other humans. He now expects all of them to be patient and kind and willing to sing terrible lullabies." "Those lullabies are classics. I'll have you know my mother." Marcus stopped, noticing Chen approaching with several other members of his former platoon. "Hey, Chen, didn't expect to see you here." "Wouldn't miss it, sir, or should I say ambassador." Chen grinned, then nodded respectfully to Lyra. "Congratulations to both of you. And to the little guy who started this whole thing by crying at exactly the right moment." "Chiron does have excellent timing," Lyra agreed, smiling. They spent the next hour accepting congratulations and carefully navigating political conversations, with Chiron serving as the perfect excuse to extract themselves from particularly tedious discussions. By the time they escaped to their newly assigned quarters, larger than Marcus's old space, designed to accommodate both human and Seraphim needs, he was exhausted. I'm not sure I'm cut out for diplomacy, he admitted, collapsing onto the couch. Too much talking, not enough doing. You will adapt. You are good at adapting. Lyra settled beside him, Cairn finally sleeping in her arms. Though I admit I prefer when it is just us. No political considerations, no watching eyes. Just you, me, and a baby who has strong opinions about bedtime. Exactly. She leaned against him and Marcus wrapped his arm around her shoulders, careful not to jostle Cairn. Marcus, do you ever regret it, stepping forward that day, everything that came after? Never. He pressed a kiss to her temple. Best decision I ever made, even with all the paperwork. The paperwork is considerable. Worth it. They sat in comfortable silence, watching Cairn sleep, and Marcus thought about how far they'd come from that first morning. From a tense standoff to this, a family cobbled together from two species, held together by trust and love, and a crying baby who'd needed comfort. What do you think he'll grow up to be? Marcus asked quietly. Cairn. Lyra stroked her son's head gently. I do not know, but he will grow up in a universe where humans and seraphim work together, where his mother's love for a human soldier is accepted rather than condemned.